policy regarding crimes and punishment, for adequate solutions to be found to permanently improve the work of the judiciary and penitentiary systems. This new policy will be shored up with a new policy for rehabilitation and reintegration. It's currently being drafted, and it will make it possible to fight recidivism and to ensure that people coming out of prison can be returned into society and reintegrated. President, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, Gabon is starting its second year as a member of the Human Rights Council. We are therefore determined to support the Council in the development of new tools which will serve as a basis for protecting and promoting human rights, consolidating the work of the Human Rights Council to ensure respect for human rights. In a context where the challenges are now becoming ever more global, and where our destinies are all ever more interlinked, we need to demonstrate international solidarity in order to build a more prosperous, fair, and equitable world. All that remains is for me once again to thank you and reiterate the commitment and mobilization of the people of Gabon to ensure that we achieve our shared goals, including guaranteeing that universal human rights are enjoyed by all. Thank you.
Je vous remercie, Excellence.
I thank you, Your Excellency.
Give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Juan Carlos Olguin, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Human Mobility of Ecuador, for video message, please.
Distinguished heads of state, ministers, authorities, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to speak within the high-level segment of this ordinary session of the United Nations Human Rights Council. I wish to restate Ecuador's unwavering commitment to respecting, promoting and protecting human rights in line with compliance with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. My country has ratified all international human rights conventions and instruments, and openly and continuously collaborates with all the United Nations mechanisms and special procedures. The COVID-19 pandemic has had an impact on the entire world, and Ecuador was no exception. Our country experienced a health, economic and social emergency. However, the national government managed available resources responsibly and did its utmost to address the crisis. As a result, in 8 months of this government, the success of the vaccination campaign is undoubtable. And today, we have good news to share with you that over 83% of the population is fully vaccinated. This is an achievement attained by the government and the Ecuadorian people. It was also made possible thanks to international cooperation, including the vaccination of the Guarani population to protect that indigenous people that lives in voluntary isolation in the heart of the Ecuadorian Amazon. I wish to recall that Ecuador, a year ago, together with Azerbaijan, on behalf of the non-aligned movement, presented a resolution called Resolution on the Guarantee of the Right to Health through Equitable and Universal Access to Vaccines in response to pandemics and other health emergencies. This resolution was adopted unanimously by the Human Rights Council and received support from a large number of countries. This is a topic which we need to continue working on, given that there are still problems when it comes to the equitable access to vaccines. Our National Development Plan 2021-2025 is based on the principles of democracy, diversity, solidarity, transparency and the fight against corruption. And it seeks, amongst other objectives, to ensure human rights, eradicate poverty, increase and boost social inclusion and attain prosperity. Ecuador has shown to be continuously concerned about increasing protection for the most vulnerable persons and groups of society. When it comes to the rights of children and adolescents, we are fostering programs to reduce poverty and do away with chronic child malnutrition. We will continue to defend the rights of Indigenous peoples. We are committed to defending the rights of persons with disabilities, and Ecuador has spearheaded work and leadership in this regard globally. Ecuador is party to all international conventions to promote and protect women's rights. We encourage compliance with international instruments, making it possible to achieve gender equality, and we encourage measures to be adopted to prevent, eradicate, sanction, and bring to justice the perpetrators of violence against women. On this point, for the first time in the history of the country, the budget aimed at preventing and eradicating violence against women has been quadrupled. Our country has taken very significant steps towards recognizing and respecting diversities in all its forms. We established an administrative unit within the executive, which will make it possible to draft the first comprehensive public policy to prevent and stamp out all forms of violation and discrimination based on sexual orientation and sexogeneric diversity. With respect to the rights of persons deprived of liberty, the national government aims to present or table in the coming weeks a social rehabilitation policy with a human rights-based approach. This has been prepared with support from the United Nations system and the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. My country shall continue to promote the preparation and implementation of international standards in the area of businesses and human rights. In that connection, the Permanent Representative of Ecuador before the United Nations in Geneva will continue as the presidency of the Intergovernmental Open-Ended Working Group to draft an internationally binding instrument on transnational companies and other businesses in terms of human rights. Nationally, Ecuador will continue to prepare a national action plan on businesses and human rights under the United Nations guiding principles. Turning now to the fight against corruption, Ecuador signed a Memorandum of Understanding with the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. This will make it possible to establish mechanisms to achieve integrity, transparency, and accountability. Ecuador will continue to take an active part in the discussion of the key areas of interest on this Council's agenda. We very much hope that the lessons that the pandemic has left behind will remain so that they remain as fundamental objectives in our memory, and that all difficulties that we have overcome will pave the way for a new understanding amongst peoples. I thank you very much.
I thank you. Now, I have the honor to give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Wendy Carolina Morales Urbina, Attorney General of Nicaragua, for video message.
Excellency Federico Villegas, President of the Human Rights Council of the United Nations Organization, representatives of member states, members and observers, distinguished representatives of international organizations, the Government of National Reconciliation of Nicaragua at this Human Rights Council would like to refer to the way in which bodies and international organizations such as this Council value the implementation of human rights amongst countries. Some countries are tolerant with the atrocities that take place. This unequal assessment leads to manipulation of human rights and other hegemonic standards as a result of economic and political policies from imperialist countries which affect the sovereignty of countries and do not wish for any foreign intervention. The development of human rights, which this international body must promote, is the implementation of these rights within the framework of the right to identity, sovereignty, and the historical identity of each country, without losing sight of human rights set out in the mandates and policies adopted, which particularly place emphasis on dissemination of information for analysis, which should be impartial and objective. We note and disapprove of sources used by the United Nations Office as regards the current updates, reports, preliminary reports and investigations, which, far from being based on true information of societies, only collect the voices of some sectors with political economic interests defined under the policies drawn up by major neo-colonialist countries. In the case of Nicaragua, the so-called updates on human rights are not fair or equitable, but they are true aggressions against our country. This type of reports aim to discredit our authorities and national institutions, as well as the legal system underpinning the Nicaraguan state, on the basis of false and impartial, unbiased information, with the aim of interfering in our affairs and interfering in our sovereignty, and echoing the interventionist policies of the US and other European countries against our country. We will always restate that issuing value judgments is very easy to do. What's really difficult is to achieve implementation, particularly when it comes to economic, social and cultural rights that benefit the entire country. And to do this in the midst of permanent attacks is even more difficult. We are talking in all authority about the right to life, the right to health, the right to education, to work, the right to drinking water, to electric energy, to housing, to women's rights, children's rights, young persons, the elderly, combating extreme poverty, eradicating illiteracy, citizens' security, the rights of indigenous peoples and Afro-descendants, amongst other rights, whereby we have attained major progress. We categorically state that there cannot be human rights without the democratization of wealth, and this is implemented by public policies on health and the well-being of the Nicaraguan people, as set out by our government. Nicaragua has been constantly subjected to those who wish to attack directly our human rights of the Nicaraguan people. This is a real crime against humanity. However, these unfair unilateral measures, which are coercive and illegal against our people, will not discourage us or undermine us, and we will continue to be firm in the fight against and attain the highest levels of democracy. Nicaragua never has been a threat to any country in the world. We are a peaceful, decent, courageous country within the international community. We claim justice and equality, and that is why we state that this forum is against the human rights of Nicaraguan people. We would ask the hostilities to come to an end against our people. We would denounce the emphasis placed which seek to justify sanctions against countries based on international human rights standards. We would appeal to this forum once again to take on its responsibility in terms of the history of mankind, respecting the peoples of the world to take their own decisions and to live in peace with sovereignty, respect and human consideration. Thank you very much.
I thank you. It's my honor to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Abdul Mumin, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Bangladesh, for video message. Excellency, you have the floor.
Bismillah Rahmanir Rahim. Mr. President, Madam High Commissioner, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for me to address this council. Our country, Bangladesh, was born out of a long struggle against injustice, discrimination, and oppression. So when we started our journey as a free nation, we attached a strong commitment to human rights and fundamental freedom of our people. This spirit has remained unchanged ever since. Our father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, envisioned a country that would uphold the principles of equality, inclusivity, democracy, and justice. Taking inspiration from his ideals, our democracy has flourished with an elected parliament, independent judiciary, free media, and vibrant civil society. These institutions have collectively worked in favor of a stronger focus on human rights and fundamental freedoms. They have also helped us in mainstreaming human rights in our national discourse. Under the leadership of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, the government of Bangladesh is relentlessly working to uphold the rule of law, good governance, and civil liberty. We have adopted a whole of society approach to ensure economic, social, and cultural rights and protect civil and political rights. Our government has remained vigilant against violent extremism, terrorism, human trafficking, and narcotic use that have the potential to jeopardize human rights enjoyment of all. With the highest level of professionalism and respect for human rights, our law enforcing agencies have been trying to fight these social evils. Equity, inclusiveness, and fairness characterize our development endeavors. We take pride in our success in gender equality and women empowerment. Today, in Bangladesh, women have greater participation in legislation, administration, judiciary, and civil society. We have also ensured social inclusion and empowerment of the third gender people. Recently, 2 third gender persons have been elected in our local government elections. Social justice is integral to our development policies and programs. We have put in place special measures for vulnerable sections of the society to enable them to enjoy the fundamental rights and participate in all spheres of national life. As we fight the COVID pandemic, we have ensured human rights remain at the center of all prevention, preparedness, containment, and treatment measures. Mr. President, our respect for human dignity led us to provide shelter to over 1 million forcibly displaced Rohingyas of Myanmar. By doing so, we saved thousands of lives. Despite enormous challenges, we continue to host these persecuted people and ensure their safety and security. Last year, in this August Council, I called for proactive global efforts to seek a durable solution to the Rohingya crisis. Today, I again urge the international community to help ensure that the recommendations of the Advisory Commission on Rakhine State are implemented, accountability and justice are delivered, and a conducive environment for the return of the forcibly displaced Rohingyas is created in Myanmar. The international community must not shy away from their responsibility to resolve the crisis and relieve Bangladesh from the burden that Myanmar has imposed upon us. I would like to reiterate that the Rohingya crisis was created by Myanmar and its solution also lies with them. We must not forget that it is the right of the Rohingya people to be able to return to their homeland, Myanmar. Excellencies, Bangladesh attaches high importance to the work of Human Rights Council in promotion and protection of human rights globally. We strongly support the UPR mechanism to reinforce countries' endeavors to promote and protect human rights. We also cooperate closely with other mechanisms of the Council, including the special procedures. We are equally mindful of our obligation under the treaty bodies. As a testimony to our robust engagement, we have submitted 7 treaty body reports in recent years. Mr. President, let me briefly share our perspective on some global problems that require greater attention from the Council. Climate change is an existential threat to humanity. While it is a global crisis, the most vulnerable countries bear the greatest burden. The Council has a moral responsibility of contributing to the acceleration of climate actions to save lives and livelihoods and promote climate justice. Inequality is another threat to human development and dignity. We have witnessed its worst nature during the pandemic, particularly in the form of vaccine inequality. We would like to see that Council addresses inequality within and among the states more deftly. In many parts of the world, migrants remain vulnerable and experience discrimination. During the pandemic, migrant workers were disproportionately affected due to their unequal access to healthcare and livelihood opportunities. The Council needs to reflect on solutions that can protect the rights of the migrants more effectively, irrespective of their status. Mr. President, the Human Rights Council has completed 15 years of its